Chapter 36, Leviathan. The next afternoon's watch, Darren and Newkirk were posted on the spine. Overnight the ship had swelled, the Leviathan's gut in full roar from the beastie's day of gorging. Down on the snow, the last of the ship's stores were splayed out, swarmed with feasting birds. Darren felt her own stomach rumbling with her breakfast of greasy biscuits and coffee. The crew were allowed to eat only what food the animals wouldn't touch, but a few hunger pangs were worth the bounce of the membrane under Darren's feet. Taut and healthy again, the lumps along the air beast's flanks were smoothing out. At around noon, the wind had started to drag the lightning ship across the glacier, forcing the rigger to fill the ballast tanks with melted snow. But Dr. Busk had said it would be a close thing, lifting the weight of the clanker engines along with 5 extra men. "He's moving," Newkirk said. "He must still be alive." Darren glanced up at the Huxley. Mr. Rigby had insisted on taking a watch aloft, saying he couldn't bear his last 2 middies getting frostbite from long hours of the icy sky, even if it meant sneaking out of the sick bay. "We best pull him down soon," Darren said. "Dr. Busk will skin us if he freezes up there." "Aye," Newkirk said, blowing on his hands. "But if he comes down, one of us will have to go back up." Derek shrugged. Beats egg duty. At least egg duty's warm." "Well, you might still be on it, Mr. Newkirk, if you hadn't killed one of the boffins barking eggs. It's not my fault we're stuck on this iceberg. It's a glacier, you ninny." Newkirk grumbled something unpleasant and stormed away, stomping his feet on the hard scale of the spine. He'd claimed the egg disaster had been Dr. Barlow's fault for not explaining clanker temperatures, but a number was a number, Darren reckoned. She almost called him back to apologize, but only swore might as well see how work was going on the new engine pods. Darren lifted her binoculars. The forward engines were partway down the airship's flanks, thrusting out like a pair of eyes. The tops of both pods had been removed, and muddled of oversized clanker machinery stuck out in all directions. Alec was working on the port side along with Hoffman and Mr. Hurst, the airship's chief engineer. They were all in an animated conversation, arms waving in the cold wind. The whole business seemed to be going slowly. At about noon, the starboard engine, where Klopp and Bauer were working, had sputtered to life for a few noisy seconds. The membrane rumbled under Darren's feet, but something must have cracked. The engine had shut down with a shriek, and the clankers had spent the next hour tossing bits of burnt metal down into the snow. Darren turned to scan the horizon. It had been more than a day since the Condor attack. The Germans wouldn't give them much longer. A few reckoned aeroplanes had already peeked over the mountaintop just to make sure that the wounded airship hadn't gone anywhere. Everyone said the Germans were taking their time, assembling an overwhelming force. The assault could come at any minute, and yet Darren's eyes drifted back to Alec. He was translating for Hoffman now, posting at the front of the engine pods. He spun his hands like props, and Darren smiled, imagining his voice for a moment. Then she lowered the field glasses and swore, emptying her mind of blether. She was a soldier, not some girl twisting her skirt at a village dance. "Mr. Sharp," came Newkirk's shout. "Rigby's in trouble." She looked up. Newkirk was at the wince again, cranking madly. A yellow distress ribbon fluttered from the Huxley, and Mr. Rigby's semaphore flags were moving. Darren raised her field glasses. The letters whipped past at double speed, and she'd missed the beginning, mooning dafty that she was, but the sense of the message soon became clear. "Due east, 8 legs, and scouts." Darren frowned, wondering if she'd misread the signals. Legs meant a walking machine, of course, but there weren't any 8-legged walking machines. listed in the manual. Even the biggest clanker dreadnoughts needed only 6 to move about, and this was Switzerland, still in neutral territory. Would the Germans dare attack the land? Attack by land? But as Rigby repeated the signals, the words flashed past again, clear as day, along with another bit of news. Estimate, 10 miles, closing fast. Suddenly Darren's brain was fully back into soldiering. Can you get him down without me, Newkirk? She called. Aye, but what if he's hurt? He's not. It's barking clankers, and they're coming by land. I've got to raise an alert. Darren pulled out her command whistle and piped the signal for an approaching enemy. A nearby hydrogen sniffer perked up its ears and began an alert howl. The wailing spread down the ship, sniffer to sniffer, like a living air raid siren. In moments, men were scrambling everywhere. Darren looked about for the officer of the watch. There he was, Mr. Rowland, running toward her across the spine. Report, Mr. Sharp. She pointed up at the Huxley. It's the bosun, sir. He spotted another walker coming. Mr. Rigby? What in blazes is he doing aloft? He insisted, sir, Darren said. The walker's got 8 legs, he says. I checked that part twice. 8? Mr. Rowland said. Must be a cruiser at least. Aye, it's big, sir. He spotted it from 10 miles away. Well, that's lucky. The big ones aren't so quick. We'll have an hour at least before it's here. He turned snapping at a message lizard scuttling past. Begging your pardon, sir, Darren said, but Mr. Rigby said closing fast. Maybe this is a nippy one? The master rigger frowned. Sounds unlikely, lad, but check with the clankers. See if they know anything about the 8-legged business. Then bring word to the bridge. Darren saluted, spun about, and headed down. Drop lines were hanging all along the spine, so she clipped a carabiner into one and repelled, bouncing down the flank. The rope hissed through her gloves. The metal carabiner turning hot as she slid. Darren's blood began to race. The rush of coming battle erasing everything else. The ship was still defenseless unless the clankers could get the engine going. When her boots clanged against the metal support struts of the pod, Mr. Hurst looked up from the jumble of gears. He was hanging off the edge of the engine, no safety line in sight. Mr. Sharp! What's all this howling about? Another walker's been spotted, sir, she said. Another walker's been spotted, sir. Then turned to Alec. His face was streaked with grease, like stripes of black war paint. We're not sure what kind, but it's got 8 legs, so we reckon it's big. Sounds like a Hercules, he said. We passed her at the Swiss border. She's a 1,000-ton frigate, new and experimental. But is she fast? Alec nodded. Almost as quick as our walker. You say she's here in Switzerland? Have the Germans gone mad? Warning the new engine team. Mad enough. She's 10 miles east and has scouts with her. How long do you think we've got? Alex spoke to Hoffman for a moment, translating into German the metric. Darren felt her foot tapping as she waited, her stinging palms wrapped tightly around the rope. One jump and she'd be sliding toward the bridge. Maybe 20 minutes? Alec finally said. Blister, she swore. I'm heading down to tell the officers. Is there anything else they should know? Hoffman reached out and took Alec's arm, muttering in hurried clanker. Alec's eyes widened as he listened. That's right, he said. Those scout craft you mentioned, we saw them too. They're armed with spotting flares, full of some sort of sticky phosphorus. Everyone was silent for a moment. Phosphorus, the perfect stuff to roast a hydrogen breather. Maybe the Germans didn't plan to capture them after all. Well, get going, lad, Mr. Hirsch shouted at Darren. I'll send a lizard to the other engine. And you two, let's get this contraption started. Darren took one last glance at Alec, then stepped from the strut. She dropped toward the bridge, the rope sizzling hot between her gloved hands.